Are you seriously saying mail art and either social media? Yes, I guess you are. That's kind of like saying staged plays were an early form of television. But keep on spinning the new media history. Oh, sorry, I guess you're calling it social media now, because you seem to have an appreciative audience for it here in the RHIZOME comments. Hi Tom. I consider this a personal victory, because it is the first time you have ever addressed me directly online. Your mention of stage plays reminds me of happenings, arguably another early form of social media art. The Spoleto Festival curating of Mary Jane Jacob also comes to mind. All very much prior to relational aesthetics. Adopting a perpetual eggtone and rolling one's eyes hardly constitutes criticism. It's just a rhetorical strategy. Why exactly is Johnson's practice of mail art and the community it engendered so dismissible as an early form of social media art? Why is my reading of it as a form of social media so deserving of your utter bewilderment? It is by no means a claim original to me. Are you trying to define and defend a body of artwork that ex nihilo emerges with the advent of Facebook? How can such a claim be defended without the work in question being hijacked and misinterpreted as derivative of relational aesthetics within broader contemporary art critical/theoretical dialogue? Kurt, you forget, I addressed you once before, to explain why I don't address you. Social media begins not with the advent of Facebook. Rhizome's blogging in the arts panel preceded that, but for sure the advent of blogging. So, yeah, about the turn of the millennium. Here's something I wrote on my blog, slightly tweaked. You're right, the networked culture existed prior to Nicholas Berea's Relational Aesthetics of 1998, which Ben Davis used as a marker for the beginning of social media art. But you overshoot retroactively by redefining new media as social media and tracing it all the way back to the Eisenhower era. This further muddies the muddle. Blogging culture has partaken of, or accelerated, relational experiments such as live readings of Twitter messages or YouTube playlists of MySpace intros, but it didn't begin with awareness of Beread, or Buies, or Breton. It began with the invention of last-first content management systems that allowed easy creation and updating of web pages, and faster networking between pages by means of comments, trackbacks, etc. The more relevant, or interesting, Beread reference might be the post-production essay and connections between blogging and DJ/remix culture. At least there is a shared origin in new kinds of technologies. I'd probably leave Mr. B out of the discussion altogether, since he apparently doesn't follow online stuff at all. An example, one could perhaps claim that digital programming art began with Natashka Nesvinova, or whomever. But one couldn't say that programming art began there. One could at least take programming art back to Sol LeWitt's instructional drawings, and many have, and further back to Jizn/Burroughs cut-ups, and further back to Tristan Tzara's permutational poetry. Because a program need not be a digital program. The ontological category of digital programming art leads to media-centric and material-centric dissections. The broader ontological category of programming art leads to practice-centric, concept-centric, and culture-centric discussions. Social media art is not my term. I'm just using it because it's the term Davis chose to use, and we're talking about his article. But note, Davis doesn't use the term digital social media art or online social media art. It is tautological to say that Web 2.0 art began with Web 2.0 technology, or that television art began with television technology. Those are media-specific categories that beg their own questions. Even then, Web 2.0 is some cookie/arbitrary marketing term that doesn't really delineate all that much historically or technologically, other than the introduction of a new marketing meme. Nobody needs an art historian or an art theorist to defend the claim that blogging began with blogging technology. Such a narrowly defined ontology leads nowhere interesting. I don't even think it's all that useful in staking out the parameters of a novel art movement. Because, as Maria says, nothing comes from nothing, nothing ever could. One way to defend a novel nascent/art movement is to reject all theory in history, whether good theory or bad theory, as irrelevant to the discussion of any particular piece of work. This requires a lot of anti-intellectual smoke blowing and a perpetual dismissal, without the requisite intellectual dismantling, of any and every attempt at theory. Such an anti-theoretical approach is itself based on a theory and a history. It wants to return to a kind of new criticism where the text, the work of art, speaks for itself. This is not a very clever strategy for introducing a body of work and a collection of practices into contemporary critical/theoretical dialogue. For one thing, few believe that such a critical approach is even possible anymore. For another thing, it makes a claim for the new work that is rarely defensible without resorting to a ridiculous narrowing of the criteria which constitutes the new work. More problematic to me, such an approach doesn't lead anywhere. It is an approach of realization, shutting down dialogue, rather than realization, opening up dialogue. A better approach might be something like Ed Halter here, http://content/2010/02/matter-electronics, trying to contextualize that work in terms of materialist film. I'm no great fan of always taking new media back to film. Lev Manovich has worked this mojo repeatedly, arguably, to the detriment of new media theory, but Halter is smart and a good writer and his move makes sense and opens things up in both directions, allowing us to better understand the contemporary work he's discussing, and allowing the work he's discussing to better inform the preceding film practices to which he refers. In other words, it's a successful theoretical move. Davis's approach here is a much less successful theoretical move. But it doesn't fail simply because he made a theoretical move at all. And it doesn't fail because of some single instance of misinterpretation of a single piece of work. It fails because the larger theoretical armature he sets up is skewed from the beginning. This accounts for his misinterpretation of the subsequent pieces he discusses. Regarding Bereid, I agree, he is better left out of this discussion, or brought in via altogether different means. When have you ever directly addressed me online, talked directly to me, second person, rather than about me third person? A link? If you are so down with the era of social networking, why retreat back to your self-moderated one-too-many/broadcast model blog? Why not stay here and dialogue with me on an old-school, unmoderated, although not exactly real-time, and no longer mailing list-based, bulletin board? Just link to this thread at your blog and let the dialogue play out here without your administrator-level, para-dialogue meta-commentary.